Ever heard the saying, truth is stranger than fiction?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we're diving into a story today that proves just that. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar.
Buckle up, because this isn't just battles and conquests. This is intrigue, resilience, and ultimately tragedy on an epic scale.
And listeners, you know how much we love to separate fact from the fantastical, so we've got excerpts from de Molay's Wikipedia page, which is going to be our map through all of this.
Our goal is to try to understand not just what happened to Jacques de Molay, but why his story is still so captivating even now, centuries later.
It's wild. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's 1291, and the last Crusader stronghold of Acre falls to the Mamluks.
Big turning point.
Huge. Now, before we go any further, who exactly were the Mamluks?
So picture a really powerful military class in Egypt, known for their fighting. Like they were a force to be reckoned with. And taking Acre, that was huge. It was a major turning point in the Crusades.
And right in the thick of it was Jacques de Molay.
He was.
But there's not a ton of information about him, which honestly just makes him even more intriguing.
Oh, for sure. The mystery definitely adds to the intrigue. What we do know is he was likely born in Molay, France, sometime between 1240 and 1250. And he rose through the ranks of the Knights Templar, becoming Grand Master in 1292. Can you imagine stepping into that role? Leading an order that's facing enormous challenges.
Oh, the pressure. Talk about pressure.
The future of the Crusades hanging in the balance. It's a lot.
De Molay was not one to back down from a challenge, though. He dove right into this new role, traveling all across Europe, trying to get support for a new crusade. We're talking to kings, popes, like the medieval A-list.
He knew that to revive the Templar Order's fortunes, he would need powerful allies.
Absolutely.
And this is where things get really interesting. De Molay wasn't just seeking help from the usual suspects. There's evidence that he was looking at a really unlikely partnership with the Mongols.
The Mongols. Wait, the descendants of Genghis Khan?
Yes.
That's a plot twist I did not see coming.
Right. But it seems like de Molay, ever the strategist, saw their common enemy, the Mamluks. You see, the Mongol Ilkhanate was also contending for control in the region, so an alliance, even if it was unlikely, might be the thing that tips the scales.
Medieval diplomacy in action. So did they actually join forces? Like, did they fight together?
They did. So in 1299, the Mongols, who were being led by Ghazan, launched an offensive into Syria. De Molay, seeing an opportunity, led a Templar fleet, and they raided the Egyptian and Syrian coasts. Then just a few years later, in 1300, they even took part in a joint attack on the city of Tortosa, which was very strategically important.
This sounds like a movie. But sadly, history doesn't always have a Hollywood ending. What was the outcome of all of this?
Well, coordinating any kind of campaign over those distances back then was incredibly difficult. I mean, the Mongols, they had other issues they were facing, setbacks on other fronts, so they were forced to withdraw their support.
And without their Mongol allies, the Christian forces were simply outmatched.
They were.
So the dream of retaking the Holy Land with this super unusual alliance crumbles. That had to be a huge blow to de Molay, to the entire Templar Order.
It was not good for them, that's for sure. The loss of the island of Ruad, which happened in 1302, which was also a really strategically important point, it just solidified their misfortunes. And then back in Europe, people started really talking about the Templars being dissolved, potentially even merged with their rivals, the Knights Hospitaller.
Ouch, adding insult to injury. I can't imagine that sat well with de Molay.
Yeah, not at all. He was very much against a merger. He really believed in the Templars and their unique identity, their mission. He had no idea that back in Europe, a much more sinister threat was brewing, a threat that would decide his fate and change the Knights Templar forever.
So de Molay's facing all this pressure back in Europe, even talk of merging the order with their biggest rivals.
Oh man, can you imagine how infuriating that must have been for him? Especially after everything he'd done to try to rebuild the Templars and make them strong again. But sadly, he had no idea that he was walking right into a trap, like a betrayal set up by King Philip I of France.
King Philip. Always causing trouble for the Templars. Didn't he owe them like a ton of money? I bet he wasn't too keen on them joining forces with anybody else.
That's exactly right. You see, merging the orders, but having them under his control, that was way more appealing to Philip. He might have even pictured himself as some kind of warrior king, like a Rex Bellator. But forcing a merger, even for a king, wasn't exactly a walk in the park.
So what's a power-hungry king to do?
Well, Philip, he was crafty. He saw an opportunity in all the rumors that were flying around about the Templars, whispers of heresy, blasphemy, secret rituals, all that. These accusations weren't anything new, though, it seems like. Powerful groups, especially wealthy ones, Always attracted that kind of gossip and suspicion.
A classic smear campaign, right? So Philip saw his chance and used those rumors as a weapon to get rid of the Templars and conveniently wipe out his debts at the same time.
It definitely seems that way. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, which as we all know is like the ultimate bad luck day, Philip made his move.
Friday the 13th. Spooky. But how do you dismantle an entire order that quickly, in one go?
Well, Philip was thorough. He issued these secret orders to arrest every single Templar in France. Just picture it. Dawn breaks on this day, and hundreds of Templars, including Jacques de Molay, are suddenly seized. It was a brutal and incredibly well-coordinated operation.
Wait a minute, wasn't de Molay in Cyprus?
He had come back to France for a meeting with Pope Clement V. It's kind of ironic, actually. They were supposed to be discussing the potential merger and a bunch of other issues. He was even in Paris the day before the arrests, serving as a pallbearer at a royal funeral.
Talk about adding insult to injury. Arrested for some made-up crime right after attending a royal funeral. What happened next? This is crazy.
So the Templars are thrown in prison and then subjected to horrific torture, all to try to force them to confess to these crimes that they didn't commit. The mental and physical torment they must have endured, the pressure to confess to something they hadn't done, it's unimaginable.
It's awful. What were they even accused of? What could they possibly say that would satisfy Philip?
Oh, they were accused of some pretty awful things.
What?
Spitting on the cross, trampling on it, denying Christ, engaging in forbidden rituals, you name it. It was all designed to paint them as enemies of God and the church. And these confessions that they got through torture, well, those were then used to justify everything Philip was doing to the order.
So let me get this straight. Philip, using the full power of the monarchy, completely manipulates the legal system and creates this huge propaganda campaign. And he does all of that just to increase his power and get rid of his debts.
Basically. And we can't forget about the Pope, Clement V. What was his role in all of this? Well, even though he wasn't initially on board with all of it, he eventually caved to Philip's pressure and ordered the arrest of Templars everywhere, not just in France.
Wow. Talk about a rock and a hard place. So the Pope played a part in their downfall, too. But what about Jacques de Molay? Did he crack under the pressure?
You know, initially he did. I mean, he was facing unimaginable torture. It's hard to even fathom. So he confessed to the charges and even wrote letters to other Templars urging them to do the same, which, looking back, was probably a desperate attempt to make the torture stop.
So even Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, was broken by Philip's schemes.
Not so fast. You see, Pope Clement, even though he was being pressured by Philip, he wanted to hear de Molay's side of the story directly. So he sent 2 cardinals to Paris to investigate, and in a crazy turn of events, de Molay took back his confession.
Wow. Now, that is what I call a plot twist. Standing up to both the king and the church, he must have had incredible courage.
He did. But it came at a huge cost. Philip was furious. And to make sure everybody understood that defiance wouldn't be tolerated, he had 54 Templars burned at the stake in 1310.
Oh my God. The tension is unbelievable. This whole saga is like a powder keg of power struggles, betrayals, and intrigue. You never know who to trust. So what happened to the Templar Order in the end?
Well, in 1312, a papal council was held in Vienna to decide their fate. And even though de Molay took back his confession and there wasn't any real evidence against them, the order was officially dissolved by the Pope. It was a victory for Philip, but a crushing loss for the Templar Order, an order that had once been so respected throughout Christendom.
Crushed simply by accusations and fear and political maneuvering. Just gone. It's so sad. But what about de Molay himself? What happened to the Grand Master who dared to stand up to a king?
Well, that, my friend, is a story for the final part of our deep dive.
So the Templar Order is gone, wiped out, and Jacques de Molay, their leader, their Grand Master, what happens to him?
Well, he's still a huge problem for King Philip, even though the order itself is gone.
Because he took back his confession, right?
Right. Even though he was imprisoned, he still publicly insisted that the Templars were innocent. He was a living, breathing symbol of what Philip had done.
Wow. It's hard to imagine the kind of courage that takes, but even so, Philip couldn't just let him go free at that point, could he?
No. De Molay, especially in the eyes of many, was still the Grand Master, and he posed a real threat to everything Philip had worked to create. He had to silence him.
So how did it end? How did Jacques de Molay die?
In 1314, after years in prison, he was sentenced to death.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Burned at the stake on an island in the Seine River.
Right in the heart of Paris, a very public execution. I can't even imagine what that must have been like. The crowds, the smoke, that sense of desperation, but maybe also defiance.
It's incredible because even as he was facing this horrific death, he refused to break. He would not confess to those lies. Instead, he used his final words to tell the world that the Templar Order was innocent.
Wow. What a way to end such a turbulent life. Standing up against tyranny and injustice, even in death. It's pretty powerful.
Definitely. And it's no wonder that all kinds of legends grew from that fire.
Legends? Like what? Tell me more.
Well, the most famous one is the legend of Jacques de Molay's curse.
A curse, really? Like out of a movie?
Exactly. The story goes that as the flames were all around him, de Molay cursed Philip IV and Pope Clement V, calling on God to judge them, to avenge him and the Templars.
And the really eerie part.
Both Philip and Clement died within a year of de Molay's death. Coincidence? Maybe. But a lot of people saw it as proof of the curse, de Molay's power, even in death.
Even if you don't believe in curses, you have to admit the timing is hard to ignore.
It is. And it gets even more interesting because the French monarchy, which had seemed so strong under Philip IV, they experienced a series of misfortunes in the years that followed. And of course, all of this just made the legend of de Molay's curse even stronger.
It really makes you think about how history is written by the victors, but legends, well, they're fueled by something else entirely. A need for justice, maybe, or a desire for revenge, and definitely a fascination with the unknown.
For sure. And Jacques de Molay's story really has all of that.
This whole deep dive has been incredible. We've covered so much: political intrigue, betrayals, torture, executions, even a curse. It's unbelievable.
Quite a story.
It really is. But there's one thing we haven't really touched on: what happened to the Knights Templar after the order was disbanded?
You know, that's a story for another deep dive, for another time. Because even though they were gone, people were still fascinated by them. All these stories started popping up. Legends about hidden treasure, connections to the Holy Grail, even ties to modern-day Freemasonry. It's amazing how their story, just like de Molay's, still captures our imagination, still sparks debate all these centuries later.
It's true. And I think Jacques de Molay's story is a really good reminder that history is rarely simple. It's not black and white. It's way more complicated than that.
All right, there's so many sides to every story.
It's like this tapestry made up of facts and legends, all woven together with this very human need to understand the world.
I love that, a tapestry. It's so true.
Well, sadly, we're out of time for today, but thank you so much for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the life of Jacques de Molay.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
He was a man who dared to challenge a king, a man who wouldn't back down from his beliefs, and his story still resonates with us today, which I think says a lot. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into those mysteries all around us.
Thank you for listening. If you love history, don't forget to subscribe to History with Bree and Peter. Join us for more fascinating stories from the past. Hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode.